Okay. In December 23, 1913, when the Federal Reserve System was created, the two officers in the bank at the time, the relevant ones, as the registrar and the treasurer, would have been Parker and Burke. But we'll get what happens with that later. At that time, they created 12 new banks that were very special. They were the Federal Reserve banks that formed the Federal Reserve Bank system. And they had one in Boston, Massachusetts, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Cleveland, Ohio, Richmond, Virginia, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, Illinois, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Kansas City, Missouri, back to Missouri, Dallas, Texas, and then finally San Francisco, California. Well, as we know, population spread southwest, and so the Bank of San Francisco was really the biggest one, but at the time it was covered a large territory, but very thinly populated at the time when this was created. So, I mean, we had two southwestern states that had just been created as states the year before, Arizona and New Mexico. But at any rate, as you see, the same 12 banks, numbered 1 through 12 or A through L, were also the basis for another system known as the Federal Reserve Bank System. Now, let's take a look here. Just a regular Federal Reserve note was part of the whole system and is the main part of the Federal Reserve Bank system. And for that, the United States of America will pay the bearer on demand, not this or that bank, $5 or whatever the amount may be. And so, whereas when we introduced what's called a Federal Reserve banknote system, we're really following much more the national banknotes. National banknotes all say national currency on the top, as you see there and as you see there. And when we get to the National Federal Reserve banknotes, they will also say national currency. So, but here you can see in each case, it's the Huntington National Bank of Columbus will pay to the bearer, $5, or the North Broad National Bank of Philadelphia will pay to the bearer on demand $5. So you see, it's the individual bank. So that's one of the main differences. So let's get to the Federal Reserve banknotes themselves. So this is the Federal Reserve banknotes all together. So we're going to talk first, however, of the first couple of years. As I said, the Register of the Treasury, when the Federal Reserve Bank was created, was a fellow named Parker. But before they went into any of these Federal Reserve Bank notes, it was a fellow whose name was Teehee, who came on in 1915. So you see, these are a little bit later, series of 1915, but they still read authorized by Federal Reserve Act of December 23, 1913. So they were already planned for in the original act that created them. These two also have national currency on the top of them, and they will say, secured by United States bonds deposited with the Treasurer of the United States of America, the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, Missouri, or wherever the one it may be, will pay to the bearer on demand $5. And it even says on here, Federal Reserve banknote. So you can see the language derives from the national banknote, because they have national currency. They have this little verbiage here about secured by United States bonds deposited with the Treasurer of the United States of America. And of course, the particular bank is paying it. And instead of saying just national currency or whatever, they will actually say Federal Reserve banknote. On the other hand, on the back, while they borrow some of the verbiage from the national banknote, which reads different than a Federal Reserve Bank. I'll read both of those, but they really read exactly the same, as you can see. It says, this note is receivable at par in all parts of the United States in payment of all taxes and excises and all other dues to the United States except duties on imports, and also for all salaries and other debts and other demands owing by the United States to individuals, corporations, and associations within the United States, except interest on public debt. As you can see, both of these have the same thing. But on the other hand, except for the style, much of the look borrows heavily from the Federal Reserve note. See, that just says Federal Reserve note, and a different verbiage that says that this note is, this note is receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks for all taxes, and so on. Anyway, so it has a different verbiage. While they both have the same artwork, as you can see, in this case on each side, they also have different things. So like this one will have national currency again on the back, as well as Federal Reserve banknote, where the others just had Federal Reserve note. The denomination on the bottom and the overall lacework and grillwork is all the same. So, but this was the original series, for which there was only the $5. And here we are. And then there was the $10. Okay. Same language. And there's its back, much like the back of the $10 Federal Reserve note, but again, the different verbiage in those certain places. And again, $20, Teehee and Burke. They all have Teehee and Burke. They're all a series of 1915. And they're all authorized by Federal Reserve Act of December 23, 1913. But they also say Federal Reserve banknote there and on the back. Though again, you see the same themes as you would see on a Federal Reserve note. So, trains, planes, and automobiles here, because we're a nation on the move. And of course, ships in what is obviously the New York Harbor, judging from the Statue of Liberty there in the background. Well, in a few years they had to revise this to make a couple major changes. The first one was to include denominations that the Federal Reserve had otherwise not been connected with, and again, even when this was only in the form of the Federal Reserve banknote, namely the $1 denomination, and also, as I'll see shortly, the $2. But you still have series of 1918, Teehee and Burke, and the same language, but the other thing that changed was this language here. Secured by United States certificates of indebtedness or United States 1-year gold notes deposited with the Treasurer of the United States of America. And those were really the only changes. So again, you see this language here, authorized by the Acts of December 23, 1913 and April 23, 1918. So these become series of 1918 instead of 1915. Well, that's the $1 and the $2. It's the same series of 1918, Teehee and Burke, and so on. Okay. And the same changes go through the existing denominations. $5, same things. Still the usual verbiage for a banknote, a national or Federal Reserve banknote. $10 has that right there, all the same. And Jackson was on the $10 notes at the same time when they were for the Federal Reserve notes. And the $20, Cleveland is on that. So, but it's the same thing. It's 20, Teehee and Burke, series of 1918. Same things on the reverse. And now we get a denomination also being added. The $50, which is also in this case existing only a series of 18 and with the signatures of Teehee and Burke. And it was all the same verbiage here about 1913 and also the April 1915, or 1918, I should say. And it's also a series of 1918. There was a design made for the $100 denomination, but this, of course, is never really made. However, somebody did prepare a design. This is what it would have looked like. It would have the same image of Benjamin Franklin on the front. And as you can see here, this is also meant to be a series of 1918 and a Teehee and Burke. And it would have had the same thing on the reverse as the $100 Federal Reserve note, other than the verbiage being that from the National Bank note. So, but this is only a simulation. It isn't real. We never really made any notes of this kind, of this denomination, during 1915 or 1918. We'll continue with the next one. Thanks for listening.